1916. War rages all across Europe. Frenchmen and Germans slaughter each other if they're done, and soon the Brits will have their own chance at a massacre at the Somme. But throughout all this, the seas remained quiet. But that wouldn't last. Alright. Before we begin, I have a few things to say. If you don't care about any of this, just skip ahead. Number 1, this video was chosen by you guys in a vote. So if you don't like it, next time I do a vote, vote! Number 2, originally this video was supposed to come out the day of the battle, but that obviously didn't happen. Look. I was incredibly busy, okay, with my, historical studies and research and academic works, and all of that was a lie. I was playing Zelda. Thirdly, this video might get a little confusing if you're not a naval buff, so here's a cheat sheet for you. Screenshot this if you need it. You probably will. Alright, now without further ado, to the biggest naval battle in history. Kinda depends on who you ask. Even before war was declared, the Germans were already threatening the Royal Navy in the North Sea, which unintentionally led to the Brits allying themselves their two biggest rivals. Then, when the Archduke got shot and Europe got hot, the threat of the Imperial German Navy became a reality. Normally, the British kept their navy docked at the Channel or the Thames, but with Germany so close by, the Brits docked all their battleships at a new base at Scapa Flow. Without the Royal Navy, however, the English coast was completely undefended, and soon, English towns were being bombarded with German raids. The worst of these raids was the raid of Scarborough, which killed over 100 civilians and infuriated the British public. But these raids, while cruel, were also out of desperation. You see, the German Empire, while strong, was heavily reliant on foreign exports, especially for food. As soon as the war began, Britain blockaded the North Sea, cutting Germany off from global trade. At first, this was just a minor inconvenience, but by 1916, the German population was starting to starve. Though, I should note that Germany was trying something similar in the Atlantic with unrestricted submarine warfare. So far, naval warfare has almost been exclusively fought in South America, first at Cornell and then at the Falklands. The North Sea itself remained silent, with one notable exception at Dogger Bank. This was all mostly due to the German High Seas Fleet commander Hugo von Paul, who was extremely cautious, and throughout his entire service, the fleet never left its port at Wilhelmshaven. But in early January, he retired due to complications with cancer, dying a month later. He was replaced by Vice Admiral Reinhard Scheer, and unlike Paul, Scheer would be nowhere near as shy. He fully believed that his ships were better designed and armed than those of the British, and that if it wasn't for the numerical advantage, the blockade would stand no chance. He would waste no time showing his ambitions, personally leading a raid in southeast England. Then, something massive happened. After much pressure from the neutral United States, Germany ended its policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. This infuriated Reinhardt, but it gave him an idea. February 23rd, Scheer met up with the head of the German Navy, Alfred von Tirpitz, and Kaiser Wilhelm himself and laid out his plan. You see, the German raids couldn't stand up to the grand British fleet at Scapa Flow and her mighty dreadnoughts, but so far, they didn't have to. The German raids were simply too fast for the Royal Navy to stop. However, there was one British unit that could and did fight back against the German raids. The 1st Battlecruiser Squadron, led by Vice Admiral David Beatty. So the plan was for the Germans to send out their own battlecruiser fleet, led by Scheer's right-hand man, Franz von Hipper, to lure out Beatty to battle, where they would ambush him with the entire High Seas Fleet, defeat him, and get away before Scapa Flow knew what was going on, destroying a valuable part of the British blockade. With this victory, the Germans would be free to do whatever they wanted in the North Sea and weaken the crippling blockade. Scheer would also send out his now available submarines to scout ahead in case the English tried anything funny. With the Kaiser's approval, the plan was put into action, with Scheer sending out his subs ahead. But due to one of the German dreadnoughts needing repairs, the plan had to be delayed for a few days, where the British started to notice the submarines. Finally, on May 30th, Scheer and Hipper would set sail. Sure enough, Beatty quickly came out to challenge Hipper. Well, that was fast. A little too fast, actually. Well, little did the Germans know that their entire plan was up. The codebreakers at Room 40 had discovered Scheer's message. The entire British Grand Fleet, led by Admiral John Jellicoe, was at sea. However, due to a communication error between Room 40 and naval staff, the British had no idea Scheer's High Seas Fleet was also at sea. They thought it was just Hipper. So the Germans had no idea the Grand Fleet was coming, and the British had no idea the High Seas Fleet was coming. This can't end well. At 3:45, Beatty met Hipper's forces near the Jutland Peninsula, and battle commenced. The two lines engaged in fierce combat. Shells and gunfire lit the sky. Then, a shell smashed into Beatty's leading ship, the Lion, killing most of the gunhouse crew, with one officer reportedly having his head cut clean off. The ship was only saved when a dying Major Francis J.W. Harvey dragged himself to the voice pipe and ordered the magazine to be flooded, putting out the fire. But the last ship in Beatty's line, the Indefatigable, wouldn't be so lucky. It was hit by 2 shells straight into the magazine. 30 seconds later, it completely blew up. Its carcass then rolled on its side, sank, and disappeared. Only 2 of its over 1,000 men would survive. But it wasn't over yet. 10 minutes later, the 3rd ship in line, the Queen Mary, completely blew up. It was ripped in half with a massive raging fire going down it. The last thing anybody saw of it was her desperate crew trying to escape. Only 18 of them would make it home. After witnessing all this, Beatty simply turned to his flag captain and said,
"There seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today."
What a legend. Meanwhile, all this was happening, little destroyers battled each other in what was quickly becoming a no man's land, until Beatty ordered his back. As the destroyers returned, they realized something odd. Beatty was turning around. Was he running away? Kinda. Earlier in the battle, some of Beatty's scouts had gone the wrong way, and it just so happened that by going the wrong way, they managed to spot Scheer's fleet. After being made aware of this, Beatty decided to make the most of the situation. He turned his ships around and headed towards Jellicoe. With this move, he not only managed to dodge Scheer, but now he was also leading the Germans towards a trap of his own. Sneaky, sneaky. Hipper joined up with Scheer and chased Beatty. Not knowing that every second they sailed north, they inched closer and closer to the mighty Grand Fleet. Then, Hipper received a message.
Schlachtschiffe vor uns, Dreadnought-Klasse. Dreadnoughts. Ach nein.
When the Germans came out of the smoke, they saw a terrible sight. The entire Grand Fleet at sea. But Beatty had failed to give any information about Scheer to Jellicoe, so the Brits were just as surprised to see the Germans. After much deliberation, Jellicoe ordered his ships to turn left and create a battle line. Meanwhile, the 1st Battlecruiser Squadron led a suicide charge against the enemy, and the capital ship, the Defense, was destroyed in seconds. But their sacrifice distracted the Krauts long enough to let Jellicoe finish his formation, and it was now the Brits' turn to rain fire from above. The firing was intense. The whole sky was practically gray with smoke. The leading ship in particular, the HMS Invincible, led by Sir Horace Hood, scored non-stop hit after hit on the Germans. But sadly, it was hit at the magazine, sparking a massive explosion, sending her to the bottom of the sea. Only 6 of her over 1,000 crew would survive. But this kill wouldn't save the Germans. The German ships were being blasted from all directions. Corpses littered the floor, men scrambling to put out fires, while medics tried desperately to save who they could. Scheer knew he couldn't last much longer, so he ordered all his ships to turn around, and they disappeared. But Jellicoe wasn't about to let the Huns escape. He turned his ships again, moving south to block the route to Wilhelmshaven. And when the Germans came back, they once again were blasted like hell. Every German ship was now a floating disaster, some near sinking, but miraculously, and due to the strength of German steel, none of them sank. Scheer once again ordered a retreat, but this time there was no order. It was complete chaos, and the Germans disappeared into the night. The battle now devolved into a cat and mouse chase into the night. Scheer knew that with most of his ships near sinking, he needed to escape before sunrise, or else he and all of his men would go straight to Davy Jones' locker. But Jellicoe also knew this, and was planning to cut the Krauts off by heading towards the Dutch coast. He placed his dreadnoughts at the front, so they would be the first to engage the enemy. The back of his line was composed only of his destroyers. Well, guess what? That's exactly where the Germans were headed. But the Brits didn't have proper searchlights, so at first they couldn't tell if the oncoming ships were friendly or not. The Germans, however, did. Now, let's do a little math. Giant dreadnought versus tiny cute destroyer. Yeah, I didn't think so either. The massive German dreadnought smashed into the destroyers. The little ships stood no chance. 5 of them were sunk, and the rest scrambled away. During this chaos, a light cruiser, the Black Prince, that got lost earlier in the battle, stumbled into this mess. She originally thought that the ships ahead of her were British, so she gave a friendly signal. The Germans responded by opening fire. She was instantly sunk, and all of her crew perished. A few minutes later, though, one of the runaway destroyers managed to score a torpedo hit on the German pre-dreadnought Pommern, also killing all of her crew, making this the only major combat German casualty during the battle. Meanwhile, all this was happening, nobody bothered telling Jellicoe at the front any of this. He was actually sleeping at the time. But when he finally woke up, it was too late. The Germans had completely passed him by. And by daylight, they disappeared. Hugging the Danish coast, the High Seas Fleet limped their way to Wilhelmshaven. Not every German ship made it though. The Wiesbaden succumbed to her wounds and sank, leaving only one survivor, while the Lützow had to be evacuated and scuttled. But with most of his ships still afloat, she arrived back home to a hero's welcome. The Battle of Jutland was now officially over. The Germans lost 1 battlecruiser, 1 pre-dreadnought, 4 light cruisers, and 5 destroyers, and suffered 2,551 casualties, while the British lost 3 battlecruisers, 3 armored cruisers, 8 destroyers, and suffered 6,094 casualties. As you can see by the scoreboard, the casualties were very one-sided. The German press quickly declared victory, and there was celebration all across the Reich. However, despite punching the English in the mouth, the Germans had failed to accomplish their goal. So in the end, Jutland was a British victory, though there wasn't much celebrating in the UK. When the public first heard of the battle, they were stunned at what looked like a defeat. But after more clarity came out, the masses were calmed. In the end, the battle concluded in a status quo, which means that just like most things in World War I, all those men died for nothing. After Jutland, the High Seas Fleet wouldn't attempt any more operations at sea. Instead, once again, Germany implemented unrestricted submarine warfare, which unintentionally led to the US joining the war. By 1918, the sailors, sick of war, mutinied, starting the German Revolution. And after the war, Germany was forced to scrap the entire High Seas Fleet, and Germany would never again threaten the Brits at sea.